Welcome back to Encyclopedia.zone. My name is Don Jolly. I am the editor-in-chief of Encyclopedia.zone, the internet's premier home for literary shitposting. And if you're waiting on me to approve your forums account, I'm sorry about the wait. I have been relocating across the country and making sure that I don't starve to death in the future so that I can produce more video content for you, the people. I'm also a freelance writer whose work has appeared on Boing Boing and in Penthouse magazine, among many other outlets. And today, I got a question. What is it about Star Wars? Why is this cheesy space movie about intergalactic rebellions and psychic wizards so friggin' popular? Why is it this thing and not any of the litany of other science fiction fantasy properties that has so inserted itself into the 20th and 21st century culture, primarily in the West? Why is it this movie and not anything else? Why do people know? Why does your asshole cousin, who will never fucking read a Frank Herbert paperback, why does he know what Tatooine is, but he doesn't know Arrakis? Why do people know about the Jedi, but they don't know about the Lensman? Why do people recognize the references, the reference to Hoth, and they don't understand the reference to Planet Mongo? Like, what is it about Star Wars? Now, that's a complicated question, and I think that there's a very complicated answer to it, but in part, it comes down to the extremely strong visual identity of these films, specifically the first six that were made by George Lucas in various levels of involvement. He only directed 4 of them. But Star Wars has an extremely unique visual identity in comparison to other science fiction and fantasy films. You could sit a person who doesn't have a vested interest in science fiction or in fantasy down in front of that first Star Wars movie, and they'll understand exactly what's going on because the visuals communicate more of it than the clumsy expository dialogue. Little ship, giant ship, Rebels, Empire, you get the whole thing in that first shot. Not a line of exposition needs to be delivered for you to understand the political position of the characters in that 1977 original Star Wars. Star Wars has a very rich visual iconography, and I think kind of a unique approach to science fiction iconography in the history of film, which is to say that Star Wars doesn't actually invent many of its images. It repurposes images that are already powerful and already resonant with its audience. For example, the throne room scene at the end of A New Hope, after Luke Skywalker, daring raid, blows up the Death Star, he is feted by the Rebel Alliance. We get a short, wordless sequence set to John Williams' stirring score, wherein Luke Skywalker, Chewbacca, and Han Solo walk down the center of an assemblage of Rebel Alliance troops. This was created with an optical effect where they multiplied a very small amount of extras to make them look like a massive assemblage. It's a tremendously effective image of political triumph, and it is also not original to George Lucas. It's a pretty direct quotation of Leni Riefenstahl's The Triumph of the Will, which you will see up here. Star Wars, Triumph of the Will, down there. Now, film critics have talked in the past about whether it is responsible or what Lucas is trying to say with using a quotation from a Nazi propaganda film at the end of his space wizard fantasy movie. I don't think you need to read into it that deep. I mean, you can if you want to, but I don't think George Lucas is. I think that George Lucas is primarily a visual thinker. He's a genius of film visuals. And the reason he's a genius of film visuals is that he chooses them specifically based on their efficacy. If you want to communicate political triumph in a cinematic way, you really can't do better than Leni Riefenstahl. So George Lucas says, well, that works. I'm going to use it in my film. It's going to very quickly and efficiently, and most of all, effectively communicate the sense of triumph that I think is important for this scene. It already works. He knows it already works. You know it already works. Because even if you haven't seen The Triumph of the Will, even if you're not consciously viewing it in the context of its fascist associations, you are receiving an image that already has a history, already has a cultural context surrounding its efficacy. You are maybe not noticing the direct parallel, but to quote cultural critic and literary essayist David Foster Wallace, you may not have noticed it, but your brain did. The Star Wars films are built out of a collage of visual quotations. Their iconography is visual quotations from other films, of course, Lawrence of Arabia, The Hidden Fortress, various samurai films that a lot of the Jedi iconography is derived from. But I think that one of the primary drivers of the effectiveness of Star Wars, especially once again in the West, is that they use a lot of those original 6 films use a lot of historical images that have a tremendous amount of built-in power and meaning that is not specific to the Star Wars context themselves. Star Wars basically takes images like the image from Triumph of the Will, kind of denationalizes them, kind of removes them from their original historical context just enough that you can read it in this sci-fi fantasy setting where you're not consciously thinking about the historical associations, but you're still getting the power of those images. The war room from which the Battle of Yavin, the big dogfight at the Death Star, is coordinated, looks like the war room where the Battle of Britain was coordinated. And this, of course, was an image that had been distributed into the West, not only in newspaper reports and newsreels, but also in film versions. And George Lucas is, I think, consciously drawing on that iconography so that not only are you getting, you're getting a cool visual of all these, Alliance people like sitting around a big, computer terminal charting the Death Star as the dogfight goes around. It's used to build tension. You're also getting that little part of your brain that recognizes in a subconscious way the Battle of Britain associations, so that you're feeling like, this is like the Allies. This is like the Allies fighting the Luftwaffe. This is like the Royal Air Force defending the Isle of Britain. This is an image that is associated once again in the West with the existential battle for human freedom against unbelievable odds. And of course, that is what the Death Star battle is about. People maybe aren't going to care about it if it's shot a different way or if the visuals are more obtuse. Even somebody who doesn't have a vested interest, like I said, in fantasy or science fiction imagery, you can sit them down in front of the Death Star battle and they'll get what's going on because it's drawn out of very effective iconography, which is sort of collaged together to create this new thing. And it's all over George Lucas's Star Wars movies. The Neimoidian invasion of Naboo from Episode 1, even. It looks like the Nazis rolling into Paris in the Second World War. Luke Skywalker's outfit when he goes to confront Darth Vader on Cloud City in The Empire Strikes Back looks like a tan variation of the Royal Air Force's battle dress uniform. It even goes down to the props. Like, Star Wars props don't look like other science fiction props. They don't look like Flash Gordon ray guns. People aren't wearing those weird silvery space suits that you see in films like Logan's Run, those kinds of things. Han Solo's laser gun isn't like a sleek silver, Star Trek phaser kind of device, although Star Trek is also very effective at deploying its visual iconography, although I think in a slightly different way. It's built out of actual guns, mostly a Mauser pistol with the barrel apparatus that was drawn from an MG-81 machine gun. Luke Skywalker's lightsaber looks like a real piece of technology because it is. It's a slightly modified Graflex flash handle, I believe. It's a real machine. It's a recognizable machine. You've probably seen it if you've seen photographs of old, like red carpet promotions and stuff where people are holding up flash bulbs. It's a real instrument. It's been redeployed into a fantasy context by the film, but it looks like an actual piece of technology, once again, because it is. The whole visual operation of Star Wars, and I think one of the things that makes it so effective is that it is not trying to invent its visual lexicon out of whole cloth. It's drawing on images that are subconsciously very relevant to its audience and carry a lot of vested meaning. And once again, it kind of denationalizes, dehistoricizes them, and puts just enough fantasy elements into it that you feel like you're watching something that's self-contained, that isn't necessarily this like larger commentary on politics or anything like that, which I don't think Star Wars is, at least not in specific. It's more of a mythological story than a directly historical or political one. But you're still, he's George Lucas and the rest of the craftsmen and artists responsible for those first 6 films are using images that were already important and already meaningful to the audience, so that as kind of a visual shorthand, so that you can get people, once again, who maybe wouldn't be inclined, like if you sat them down in front of Battle Beyond the Stars, they'd be like, what the fuck is this? I don't want to watch Count Zarkov with his fucking giant over pronounced dentures and his Dracula cape. What the fuck are you showing me? This is some kiddie school bullshit. But you sit them down in front of Star Wars, they're going to understand it, it's going to feel meaningful, and they're going to emotionally resonate with it. Because basically, they already do. They recognize these images. They feel familiar. So, obviously, it's a big year for Star Wars. We've got Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, coming out. And oh man, excitement levels are through the roof here at Encyclopedia Zone HQ. So the iconography of Star Wars is drawn on these like real-world technology, real-world historical events, and of course, a whole smorgasbord of cinematic allusions and quotations. Once again, it creates its visual identity out of images that are already meaningful before George Lucas gets around to repurposing them into his science fiction epic. Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. We got 2 trailers so far. What's the visual iconography that we're dealing with here? Well, it looks like Star Wars. That's kind of it. Boy, I'm excited to see that movie. All right, that's all for Encyclopedia.zone today. That intro was by Wi-Fi Hermit, and my shirt today, this is a new woodblock print t-shirt by Encyclopedia Zone artist Max McDermott. You can buy it on Etsy now. I recommend that you do. It's a great shirt. Once again, link in the description below, and more videos to come. Please subscribe, and we'll see you soon.